He's the founder and CEO of Rebutter, and I'm sure he's better than me at explaining what he does, but basically, if I understood correctly, it's a solution to echo chambers. It's meant to be a solution to echo chambers. It's a Chrome plugin, and it tells you when someone online disagrees with the web page you're looking at, and it gives you a different perspective and critical analysis on the subject that you're interested in. And also, he's the creator of something called the Socratic Web, which is sort of a semantic web in the sense that it gives you one type of web connection to all that has been critiqued. So it's a critical semantic web. And so it's obvious that Shane Greenup is an expert of misinformation, but also he's really trying to find solutions because he's a very positive thinker. We talked last night at the Facebook drinks, and I found him very positive in terms of technical solutions to problems that many of us didn't think would, or don't think would be just technical. But I mean, I'm sure his presentation will clear our thoughts. I have many questions for him maybe later, and please make sure you raise your hand so that I can allow you to ask him questions if they come up while if you're intrigued by his presentation. So please welcome Shane Greenup.
Thank you very much. Hopefully some of the reverb's gone. Okay, are we up on the screen? Can I go to the slides? Thank you. So thank you very much, Anna, for the presentation, for the introduction. And yeah, as Anna said, I've got a long presentation. I'm going to do it as quick as I can so we can get as many questions as possible. But I'm covering quite a lot of content because I've broken this up into three main sections. In the first section, I want to go into what everyone seems to be doing to deal with this fake news problem and sort of give a broad overview of what's happening and my critique of what everyone's doing and why I think none of them, even if executed fully with all the money available, will actually solve the problem of fake news and in some cases actually make it worse. Then I want to try to introduce a number of ideas to help change the way we think about the problem and change the way we approach solving it. And my goal of the second section is to hopefully plant some seeds, get some people thinking differently so that we can get new ideas. Because I keep seeing the same ideas and people think they're new, but they're the same ideas over and over. So I want to get some new ideas. And the third section, I will go into the Socratic Web, which is the changed idea I had from the startup that I founded, Rebutter. It's a changed version of that I think has a chance of addressing the core problem of fake news. But thinking back to the second section here, I'm more than happy to be proven wrong on that. I might not be right. What matters is that we start thinking differently so that we can get other ideas that may be right. So the third section will at least be sort of like an helpful idea generator maybe. Now, so Anna mentioned the fake news concept. The term, hate it or loathe it, no one really likes it, but I've sort of given in to just using it because it's a hashtag, it's a phrase, it's a search term that is recognized. And when you use it, people vaguely know what you're talking about. And I say vaguely, and that's the beauty of it, because if I say misinformation, am I talking about propaganda or disinformation? Maybe not. Maybe I'm being specific. With fake news, it's so general that it actually catches what I mean better than anything else, because when I say fake news, when I say misinformation, I actually mean all forms of factually incorrect information, all forms of factually correct information that are used to deceive people, to twist ideas, to lead people into faulty beliefs. So it's a nebulous term, and so when I use the term, I'm not just talking about news, I'm also talking about scam websites. Send us $1,000, we'll give you 5% interest. So when I'm approaching this problem, I'm looking at the internet as a whole and all forms of deception and manipulation and lying and intentional and unintentional. Now, to get to the first section, all the existing approaches to fake news, this is an attempt to summarize them all. One of the big ones is people recognize we need to improve media literacy. Now, this is typically done through schools. We need to improve education in the school system, in universities, online apps, so online programs. So lots of people are putting funding and time and people power into one or more of these approaches. And I'm all for that. I'll just go through it quickly. Another place that people are putting a lot of time and money into is improving journalism. This conference has a lot of focus on this. We need to improve funding to journalism. The business model of journalism is kind of dying at the moment, so how do we improve the business model? How do we get more funding? We need funding to improve the quality of work that journalists can do. Better systems for fact-checking, better organisations. The point of fact-checking network's been put together. There's so many people working on this, building a trustworthy authority for news, Wiki Tribune. Lots of people want to solve all these problems. Lots of people working on true fake designation, as in, is this true or is this fake news? Is this faulty? People are working on this either through crowdsourcing it, getting people to determine for them. Some people are working on machine learning, using social media to get flags and cues to identify whether something might be fake news. And AI is an extension of that, really. But the thing, when people work on this solution, they're usually doing it, I don't know what usually, but a lot of them are doing it as services to newsrooms, and that makes a lot of sense. If you can have software that can help identify and flag fake news quicker than anyone else and get it to the newsroom, then you can get them to fact check it. Or they sell it as services to the platforms, to Facebook and Google. So there's that. And otherwise, some people are doing it as browser extensions and websites. And the sort of final area that I look at that people are approaching this problem from, it's mostly actually just the global population, the media, people in general yelling at Facebook and Google, do something. This is your fault, do something. And so there's a lot of pressure on them to filter out the fake news, to punish it algorithmically, to Google stopped allowing advertising on websites that publish fake news. Facebook partnered with the Point of Fact-Checking Network and started flagging what they designated as fake news. So this platform-level control is another area where there's a lot of work being done. And there's a final thing, which isn't really work to stop the fake news, but it's related. A lot of money and time is going into research, to looking at how do we identify fake news, how do we change minds. It's really research of these efforts and research for these efforts. Now, can anyone, now that I've got that list up there, can anyone think, is there any approaches that I've missed there? If anyone can think of any, yell it out. Because I think that's kind of like, I'm being broad and vague because it's trying to be all-encompassing of everything that I've seen. And you see lots of efforts that are, lots of people working on the same effort. Now, if that's what I see everyone doing. And now what I want to show is the problems that I have with each of those approaches. So the first one, improving media literacy. I'm all for that. We need better education. We need better media literacy. It needs to happen. Don't stop doing it. It will never solve the problem of fake news because it's at the wrong scale. So I think this is the right approach. We need improved media literacy. But if you are trying to solve a problem that is internet-based, and the internet has billions of users at a global scale in every language, across every political ideology, and you want to solve that by teaching 20 students at a time to check their sources, or you want to target university students in privileged white nations, or you want to do it by running an online, an app, a website that people can go to learn media literacy, then you're going to be hitting less than a fraction of a % of the population. And you will never, no matter how well executed this is, you will never get to the scale that needs to be hit to really get to the fake news problem. It's important and it needs to keep happening. Don't stop doing it. But it's not a solution. It's just sort of a necessary function. And by the way, we have taught media literacy. We have taught critical thinking in schools forever, and we still have the problem. So, yeah, Facebook has 2.2 billion monthly active users. Yeah, we know how big the internet is. We know how big the reach of technology is to disseminate this sort of information, true or false. And so we have to address it at that level. Similarly, improving journalism is a scale issue as well. Again, all the work that we're doing to improve journalism, to improve its trustworthiness, its quality, the funding to enable the quality, it's important work. Keep doing it. But it's not a solution to the fake news problem, because it doesn't matter how much good quality journalism you make, it doesn't hide the misinformation. That still exists, and I can still go on Facebook and share it whether you like it or not. 100 good articles doesn't get rid of the bad articles, and it's faster and easier to make fake news than it is to make good journalism. So it doesn't matter how perfectly you do journalism, fake news will continue to exist and will continue to be spread. Craig Silverman did this work to just really highlight the point. During the Trump election, the 20 top performing false election stories from hoax sites and hyperpartisan blogs generated 8.7 million shares, reactions and comments on Facebook. The 20 best performing election stories from 19 major news websites generated a total of 7.3 million shares. So if the major news networks with brand names and massive distribution and everyone knows them gets less penetration than made up websites with made up stories, what chance do you have? Improved journalism doesn't solve the problem. It's necessary, it's important, but it doesn't fix the problem. Which then takes us to, so if the problem here is the fake news stories, I can go on Facebook and share it just as well as your good high quality journalism stories. We need to control the platforms. So this is what a lot of people end up sort of moving towards is Facebook, Google, this is your fault, this is your problem, fix it. This is the right scale. This is where we need to act. The fake news problem is an internet problem. It is a distribution problem and a reach problem. The problem is our efforts of getting platform controls so far are the wrong approach, because nearly every single one of them wants Facebook and Google and Twitter and everyone to take authoritarian control. They don't put it that way, and Facebook and Google know that they don't want to do that because they don't want the responsibility of deciding true and false for the whole population of the planet, which is effectively what we're looking at. So even Facebook, they partner with the Point of Fact-Checking Network, but they've just sort of passed the buck onto someone else. And even the Point of Fact-Checking Network is just a group of reputable organizations that they've selected that then pass the job on to their journalists to do the research. And at the end of the day, it's still just a few people reading articles, doing the investigation and deciding true or false. Now, if this got fully implemented and Facebook was doing this across all information, we now have our news feeds being regulated and filtered or controlled for us in a way which has so many vulnerabilities. The people doing it can be blackmailed, could be manipulated, they could be biased themselves, and you have no real way of knowing. It puts too much power in their hands and too much risk. But the consequences are far worse than that. That's sort of the obvious one. A study, I can show you. A study of this thing that was implemented found that because some of the stories were flagged as false, the people going through their news feed assumed that the ones that weren't flagged were true. But this is not true because our ability to find fake news is still very limited. We don't know which ones to check. It takes time to check things. So when I go and write a new fake news story and publish it, in the time between me publishing it and being flagged, it's not being flagged. So people will assume it's true. So it creates a false confidence. So by flagging some but not all stories, which is always going to be the case, you create susceptibility to believing fake news inadvertently. And that gets even worse when, go back to that, even in the ideal world where they can catch all fake news straight away, flag it all perfectly, and there's no bias, there's no manipulation, they're acting in our best interest, and they somehow magically know what is true and false in every instance, which is philosophically impossible, but let's go with it. Even then, the consequences of that are the exact opposite of what we want as a global population. Because then what we're saying is, we, citizens of the world, can't decide for ourselves what is true or false. We want you, centralized authority, to dictate and control our information flow for us because we are too stupid to think for ourselves. No one wants an authoritarian control of our information flow. Everyone wants a population that is able to think critically and make up their own minds. This is what we want. But every time we take a step in this direction, we are making that solution further and less likely and more problematic. So we do not want platform controls that are anything like that. And the wrong approach and wrong scale is fake news flagging apps. So the sorts of things where it's like people have to go out of the way to install a website they have to go to be told what to think. No one wants to do that anyway, and so it doesn't really matter. So what is it, the correct scale and the correct approach? Well, we can look at the best of each. So the correct scale on the bottom point, internet-wide platform level, that's the scale it needs to be at. But the right approaches are we need to improve media literacy, which I think of as skepticism and critical thinking, because not just media, they're talking about all content and scam websites, all misinformation. And ideally, if it amplifies the impact of corrective journalism, good factual articles, then all the better. So what can we do to bring about that seemingly impossible thing, internet-wide improvement of critical thinking and media literacy? This brings me to the second section, a different approach. I've managed to summarize my thinking down into this phrase. I think that the key to solving fake news, the fake news problem, must involve a change in human behavior globally towards increased skepticism and improved critical thinking. Now, we have to effect a change in human behavior. This is a necessary part of it, because the problem with fake news is not the content, it is not the fake news. I could write a fake news story right here, right now, make something up, and then put it there, and that is no threat to anyone, because no one will ever read it. Fake news is only a problem when someone reads it and shares it, reads it and believes it and acts on it. Fake news is a problem at the level of human interaction and human reaction. So this is entirely about human behavior, human beliefs. And it has to be global. So I've talked about the scale issue. If we're just affecting like tens of people, hundreds of people, thousands of people, that's nothing. We need billions. We need to be affecting people at that scale. And the only option we have for achieving that is technology. That's the only thing that works at this level. Social media, the internet, nothing else reaches that many people. I'll get into that in a second. And it has to improve skepticism and critical thinking, because that's all we've got. If we're just telling people what to think, then yeah, I've gone through that. So it's just skepticism, critical thinking, tools to evaluate, media literacy, all that sort of blanket umbrella term to help people be better capable of dealing with this flow of information that they receive. So, on the point of affecting human behavior and doing it globally through technology, I want to take a moment to really think about whether that's possible. Does technology affect human behavior? Writing is one of the most fundamental forms of technology we have. Writing, and actually there's sort of 2 points that I'm making here. When we invent a technology, it's usually for a very specific purpose. In the case of writing, I don't know exactly what it's invented for, but presumably something along the lines of to record who owes who what, or to record when we should go hunting and what berries to pick. But the unintended side effects of writing are ridiculously profound and massive. So it is thanks to writing that we're able to make mass civilization, societies. Writing gives us philosophy, gives us political ideology. You know, we know what Marxism is because of writing. So writing has allowed for human culture to evolve the way it has. And that is in itself a change of human behavior thanks to a technology. Time is a similar one, created for, presumably to arrange meetings of people, but allows us to do scientific research and create things that can go to the moon. So when we think about modern technology like Google was created to allow us to find pages, content on the web. But what are the unintended side effects of it? What has it changed by being in existence? Like the fake news thing is arguably one of the side effects of Google and Facebook. But one that comes to mind with me is I think the generation growing up now is growing up in a world where they know that at any time that they want to, they have access to any information they want. They don't need to remember anything. They can live a life with this presumptive knowledge of whatever they need to know. I don't know how to cook a perfect rice, but I know that I can find out how to do it. So this technology changes a belief that I have about myself and about the world, and therefore changes how I act in the world. Facebook's similar, set out to allow people to network online with their social network and share their lives. Maybe one of the side effects of that is people have less face-to-face time because they're never alone when they're at home. So technologies have unintended side effects. That sounds like a negative thing, but it's not necessarily negative. They have knock-on effects, second-order effects. And I need to introduce this point of small forces applied to many over time have profound effects. So there's this behavioural insights team created by the UK government to find ways to save the UK government money. And it's a psychological team that study psychology, and they try to come up with simple things that they could change, small, subtle things that have profound effects. One of the examples is when the UK government sends out letters to people that owe taxes, they added the line, most people pay their taxes on time, and it made a profound difference in the number of people that actually paid on time. Anyone that does digital marketing, growth hacking, or works in the startup world is familiar with how we do this sort of stuff all the time with A/B testing. Facebook will be doing this. Every company does this, where you have, we want more of X, we want more registrations, we want more time on our pages, so why don't we change things for half of our population, just a little bit, and see if it increases the metric that we want. So this is happening all the time. In each of these cases, when we're doing these sorts of things, those small changes that change the action of a percentage of the population, it seems really insignificant. But when you've got 1 billion people using a platform, when you've got 1 billion people using the internet, and you can incrementally move that population towards a behaviour or action that you want, that multiplied over time with, you know, feedback loops that happen as populations change, can have a profound effect on the world. So don't underestimate the power of small nudges in the right direction. And finally, any solution that we have to this affecting human behaviour at a global level has to be scalable. If you are reliant on a team of people, like journalists, to fact check, there's not enough time to deal with all the content. So the example here, Yahoo was a directory. It was a human curated directory. Google came up with an algorithm that allowed them to scale to every page on the web with the one algorithm. You know, it's completely scalable. Any solution that you have to fake news has to equally be scalable to deal with the constant barrage of content that's being created. So, to put this into pragmatic terms, a solution, and I don't mean solution like it's just going to make it go away, but something that gets to the heart of the fake news problem, is going to be a technological solution that is simple and scalable, that can be applied to all internet usage. It doesn't require people to change their behaviours. It's something they're already doing, but it just nudges them in that usage, which subtly or indirectly nudges them towards media literacy, skepticism, critical thinking. So a couple of little examples of things that I think might help frame this. This is a website that wanted to improve the quality of their comment section, so they made anyone that wanted to leave a comment had to answer a question about the article that they're commenting on. Now, this is where the action, answering a question, is not what they're interested in. They don't care about the question and the answer. It's a filtering mechanism. So it's the knock-on effects of that action that created the desired outcome. Now, this isn't itself scalable to the internet, but it's a good example of how creating simple little nudges can change behaviours. Something that Facebook is trialling at the moment that I do really like is providing information and context around links. So if someone shares this link, there's a little eye to the right. When you click on that, it gives you this, which is information about the publisher and related articles. Now, this is brilliant because Facebook's not telling you what to think or what to believe, whether this is true or false. They're just providing context. They're providing more information. I don't know how scalable this particular approach is itself. If I write an article in my personal blog, they don't really have publisher information about me. How do they get that? How do they decide who gets the extra information? Do they get it all from Wikipedia? Is Wikipedia reliable? There's all these sorts of questions. But at least it's a step in that direction of providing more information and allowing the people to act on it. But it's providing it in a way which also kind of nudges people to know that they should act on it. It's a little alert saying, maybe you should look into this, which is that sort of thing I'm talking about, these nudges. One thing I don't like is, Facebook is now partnering, I don't know if it's Reuters or AP, to fact-check videos. Again, they're like telling people, this is true, this is false, and it's not scalable. It's a team of people deciding on their behalf. So if we're trying to come up with a solution that nudges people towards critical thinking and skepticism at a global level, there are a couple of ideas. Before I move on to this section, I really want to hammer home this thing. Please, think about what I've said with this idea of finding a technological solution that's not about hitting the nail with the hammer, and it's like, bang, we've killed fake news. Start thinking about solutions which nudge people towards the behaviours that they need to embody, nudge people towards the activities that we want them to have, and allows them to grow into it themselves. Because we need that force to be ever present in our lives, because humans are not naturally critical thinkers. Confirmation bias is like the default mode of our brain, to just believe what we believe. So pausing and questioning what's in front of us, pausing and doubting what we read, pausing long enough to then decide I'm going to spend the time to critique and think about this is very hard for us to do. So we need every bit of help we can get, and we need to be ever present. Doing a course on it 3 years ago that taught me how to do research is not going to keep me in that mind frame to actually act on it when it's in front of me and I need to be thinking that way. So my approach to this problem is to use the internet on itself. The internet corrects itself all the time. The content is there. We have fact-checking websites, debunking websites. We have personal blogs of people that love to critique and debunk and fight and argue. We have topic-based websites that are constantly, arguing against people that are misrepresenting their field or whatever. We have communities that go out of their way to save people from their own, mistakes and scams and whatever. This content exists. And so what I suggest we do is we organise it. So this is an article written in the Daily Mail. It's now global cooling. David Rose publishes this and moves on with his life, does nothing, doesn't care. Dana Nusatelli reads that article and writes this critique of it, publishes it in The Guardian, and now that he's published this, he knows that he's critiqued that other article. But the way things are currently, nothing's changed. The people that read The Guardian know that the Daily Mail is crap. The people that read the Daily Mail don't know this rebuttal exists. No one's mind is changed, nothing improves. Instead, in the Socratic Web that I envision, when this article is published, as happens now, you publish it and you tweet it, you send it to Facebook. As well as that, you submit it to a rebuttal database. So now we indicate that that article rebuts that article and this article, because it's about 2 articles. So it's added to a database in this way. They're connected. Centralized, open source, non-profit, open access, consortium style organization manages it. And we have this database now. And assuming all these authors will spend the time to do this, and I won't go into the details of it. I've written a white paper explaining all the details, and you can find that on the web by searching the Socratic Web. But imagine every author that writes rebuttals submits it to this database. We now have this database of every critique and rebuttal as it's written. What can we do with that content? One thing that I would not recommend doing is developing a browser plugin that tells you about the critiques, because no one's going to install it, because no one installs browser plugins and no one cares and no one wants to change their behaviour, because critical thinking and skepticism isn't cool. Media literacy is not cool. No one cares. It's the wrong scale. The right scale: browsers, search engines, social media, social content creators. These things, these companies, these platforms that everyone uses already, that's the scale, because people are there using them for other reasons. So if these platforms integrate these claim rebuttal connections into their news feeds, into their search results, into the browsers, then now this content is ever present while you're browsing the web, whether you want it there or not. And I would expect that these platforms, being interested in their own self-interest, would do it in a way which doesn't bother their users. You don't want to be bothered while you're using Facebook, but it can be done that way. And before I move on from this, why would they be interested in this? Well, right now, they're under a lot of pressure to do something about the fake news problem. They are throwing a lot of money at it, and everything they've come up with so far is not helping and potentially going to make things much worse, as I discussed earlier. So they're throwing a lot of money at this and not making much headway. So that's a good reason for them to be interested in this sort of approach. And how they might implement it, as with this example with Facebook, with the information thing, how about the first place related articles, instead of being just a related article, for every link, they query this rebuttal database and say, are there critiques of this page? And the first slot will be the top critique, the top correction, the top rebuttal in every case. And if there is no critique, it may even just leave it there and say there are no critiques at this stage, because knowing that there are no critiques yet does convey information. Not usually that it's not wrong, because everything can be critiqued, right and wrong, but more often than not it will convey that this article is very new, or that this article is obscure enough that no one cares. Google, notoriously minimalist in their design. Even they have a little drop-down menu on their links. This is to access cached versions of the page, similar pages. You could have rebuttals below that. So you could make it possible to access it from Google without changing nearly anything in their design. Browsers, you don't want to clutter your browser, but they already impart information about the domains that you're on, give you access to your bookmarks. I am no designer, but I mocked this up. It wouldn't be hard to put in a little button next to the bookmark thing in your browser that's pretty out of the way, doesn't interfere with what you're doing, but is present. And I would hope someone will design a better image for it than ... but that's the best I could come up with, because I am no designer. And if Facebook wanted to be more aggressive with it, they could put it on par with like, comment, share, critiques, because it is in their interest to make this a priority for their users, to make it so that their users aren't being manipulated and played by misinformation. So in this sort of vision of the web, where this ability to access critiques is ever present on every link that you see, on every page that you visit, you are being, as the title says, you are being micro-prompted constantly to be skeptical, because that little image, ... or whatever it's going to be, will remind you that someone disagrees with what you're reading. Someone has taken the time to write a critique of this and argue against it. And you won't see it at every page, and it won't work all the time, and it's no magic thing which just fixes the problem. It is a micro-prompt, a nudge. And if once every 10 pages you notice it and your brain goes, I shouldn't just take this. That applied across the entire population, every single day, every single page, adds up. Creates feedback loops, changes cultures. How are we going on time? Awesome.
Depends how long.
Yeah, I'm getting close to the end. So we've got some questions coming, good. Critical thinking. How does this help critical thinking? Well, in this example I gave earlier, these two articles, if you read the rebuttal, the critique, this is not like a class of critical thinking. This is not even an example I've picked for its critical thinking elements, but anytime you read a critique that's half decent, you can just go through and find all these little lessons and tools in it. So he refers to regression towards the mean and cherry picking of data. Shows how he'd previously made this graph and predicted that this previous article would probably be written, because when it goes up, they always say, look, it's recovered. Showed how one of the things that the original author said was a misrepresentation, like it was an extreme reading of something that someone said, presented like it was said absolutely. So it's a misrepresentation of what someone has said, misquoting scientists. So they claimed that some scientists said, but both of the articles only named one scientist, and then when that scientist was contacted, the scientist was like, that's not what what I said has nothing to do with what they're claiming. They invented a meeting, and at the end of it, he sort of summarized it, cherry-picking short-term data while ignoring long-term trends, misrepresenting climate research, repeating long-debunked myths, and inventing things. So when you read these rebuttals, you learn the tricks of the trade of how people can manipulate you, how easy it is to take facts and twist them to make them look like they're telling the opposite story to what they're actually telling. Reading this one article is not going to make you a critical thinker. It's not going to give you the toolkit that you want. But in a world where critiques are readily available on every single page, it's almost guaranteed that you will read more critiques than when they aren't available. And again, that applied across billions of people, because it's present for everyone everywhere, will have an effect of slowly nudging people to more critiques will be read, more of these tools will be frequently in front of us, and we will start to internalize these tools and start to go, oh, I've seen this before. This is regression towards the mean, and this guy has cherry-picked these data points. And we will, as individuals and as a culture, become better at critiquing because it's ever present and constantly being reminded and exposed to it. And the bonus point of this is the high quality rebuttals and critiques get rewarded with traffic. So if you write a critique of, the Pope endorses Donald Trump and it's going super viral, and you write a really good takedown of it and you get the top place of critiquing that, the more traffic that misinformation gets, the more traffic your article will get. So, I think that's an amazingly positive thing, trying to improve. Because it's one of the biggest problems right now, as with the Craig Silverman article showing the Donald Trump thing, where the hoax websites, they got more shares than the leading websites got. Wouldn't it be great if you could piggyback on the success of made-up stories? So, to summarize, this is the Socratic Web. This has all come about from lessons that I learned from working on Rebutter. At its core, it's just a database of rebuttals. It's super simple technology, and it's all done at the URL level. So it's not a community, it's not people commenting, it's stuff that exists on the web already and stuff that's being created anyway. The rebuttal creators, the writers, are incentivized to submit it because they get traffic. Facebook and Google are incentivized to participate because they've got a real big problem with fake news, and this is a cheap solution for them. And it's different to all the other approaches out there because this does not focus on truth and false. It's not trying to decide right and wrong. Its focus is on the critique, because we want to nudge people to think, not tell them what to think. So one of the concerns a lot of people have about this is this setup will necessarily take people from articles that are scientifically, factually true to critiques that come from quacks and cranks and hoax websites. But the nature of the system is that it then takes you from that website to a critique of that. It is self-correcting because it opens up the dialogue, the critique of the critique of the critique, and so forth, as deep as you're willing to go, as interested as you are. But at the end of the day, if you're going to get tricked into believing something that's not true, you're going to get tricked into that in any instance. The only thing we can hope to do is teach you the tools to avoid being tricked. And so that's what the focus has to be on. Not on protecting you from the false information to begin with, like some overprotective parent that won't let their child go outside for fear of injuring themselves. You've got to let them grow up and learn these experiences themselves, and we have to let the global population deal with misinformation. So the Socratic Web idea is still pre-launch. The intention, we're going to be non-profit, open source, open access, consortium approach. And yeah, I'm looking for advisors, partners, and funding from now on. And so, did I make that? I will leave that slide up to finish with. This is what I want to leave everyone with. Please think about things this way. What technology, what solutions can we come up with that will nudge people towards critical thinking and skepticism? And I think this is the pragmatic thing. That's what we want. And thank you.
You started working on the Socratic Web and on the, for a while. I mean, when did you start?
So Rebutter, we started 2012,
Rebutter.
and I put about 3 years into that before I had to move on to other things because it made no money. It was me and a co-founder and volunteers. So we've never had it. Well, we had a bit of money from Startup Chile. It was like small money. And then I did other things for a couple of years, and then when fake news sort of became a big thing, when Donald Trump was elected, I was watching everyone talking about it and trying to solve it. I'm like, no, don't do that. I was like, it was hurting me because I was doing other things at the time and I wasn't working on Rebutter. I'm like, please. And so I sort of just got involved again. And because I knew what the struggles I had with Rebutter, I knew that approach wasn't going to get me there. But 2 or 3 years in between of really thinking about it and realizing that at the end of the day, there's nothing going to work unless Facebook do it themselves. It's up to them to integrate this content because to many people, Facebook is the internet now. But they don't go on the internet, they bring up their phone and they go on Facebook. So the users of the internet, like, it's changing constantly, and we have to sort of acknowledge what the internet is in a pragmatic sense on the way that people use it. So that's what led to the Socratic Web, is this idea of it's not a company, it's not a startup, it's not my thing. If someone wants to steal the idea and go and do it yourself, please. If Facebook wants to take this and do it themselves, I wouldn't recommend it, because then there's too much like exposure to them. I think it needs to be external to them. I currently believe, and this is actually something I did want to say in the talk that I forgot to say, is when I covered all the things that are currently being done, the last point I had was research. Everything I've said is my belief from my experiences and my research and what I've found. But there's virtually no research on what I'm saying, because no one, as far as I can tell, has thought this way about it. So I'm also looking for people that want to do research and can like challenge my assumptions. Because at the moment, unfortunately, they're necessarily assumptions. And this is one of the problems with technology. If someone had have gone, oh, if you create the social network, Facebook, oh, it's going to do this and this and this to society, let's do research on it first. Technology moves too fast. We implement and then we find out the consequences later. And so the solutions probably need to move just as fast.
What I like about the idea of the Socratic Web, it's the web. I mean, we're talking about web and not platforms and not closed platforms. I mean, but it's a solution for platforms as well. So, because the internet has, as we were saying, it's not just the web, it's not just Facebook. Many people think, unfortunately, that internet is only Facebook. But actually, a lot of the internet has become the apps, and we know all the philosophical thoughts and the big discussions about how the internet has become apps, or vice versa, have the apps killed the internet. And you have a very optimistic approach, but in the meantime, I'm just wondering if your inventions are just something that you want someone else to develop, or is this a business that you're developing? Is it something? Do you consider yourself an internet entrepreneur?
I guess I do. I consider myself many different things.
Yes,
so
scientist, a philosopher.
Yeah, I can't help myself but do lots of things.
But how do you make a living?
So no, with this, the intention of this is to register as a non-profit organisation, and seek funding to develop it, and then I'd like to run it as a consortium like the World Wide Web Consortium. However, I say all that knowing that I know nothing about most of those things. Mm-hmm. So hence looking for partners and people that know what they're doing, and I'm more than happy to hand this over and be an advisor to someone that can execute it. But until that happens, I'm going to keep doing it until someone does.
How much time do you think it's going to take?
Not long at all. The second there's some money for it, because the work is entirely in just redeveloping the database with consultation with the platforms to meet their needs. Because I recognize that, so we have a database already with Rebutta, but I know that there's no way Facebook would trust our data and stick it on their website, because it's their website, it's their, they don't want to upset their users. So they'd have to have filters and controls and some sort of internal metric. So I know the whole thing needs to be rebuilt from scratch with protections in mind for their business case, for them to integrate it. And so the whole thing would need to be run. So to rebuild the database from scratch with their consultation wouldn't take long and wouldn't take a lot of money. And then it's just an iterative process and growth. So yeah. I have a roadmap of all that online too. But
So I'm very happy to hand the microphone to whoever would like to ask questions or say something. Yes, is there a microphone? Yes, please. You can say him over there. Yeah, the man. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I really appreciated your approach. It really looks like you're struggling against this fight, and you're genuinely working a lot to do something about it. But I suppose that I only disagree on a point, which is on the role of Google and Facebook, because it's not just that they should do something to stop it. They should also actively do something to avoid things that go the other way around, because we have pages that are actually in violation of the Facebook terms, and they are still there with hundreds of thousands of likes, and this is not fine, while other times people gang up on posts, on pages that are facing, that are rebutting hate, fake news, and so on, and just because they are ganged up, they are the victims of the situation. So both Google, that gives relevance to website that should not even be there, and Facebook that works the other way around, and we are talking about two giants that occupy the biggest space on the internet. So I suppose that we just that it's very critical that they do something about it.
Yeah, I think the concern about Facebook being able to regulate, pages and things that are against their own terms and conditions is a significant problem that I can't really comment on. Like, it's an internal problem to Facebook. All I can really offer to that is the fact that it's a demonstration of the problem of non-scalable solutions. So, and I don't know if there is a scalable solution to that for them, but every time someone is like being abusive or whatever on Facebook, someone has to go in and check that and verify it and then moderate it. And that's a lot of work. And I am not surprised that Facebook has problems with that, and I don't know what the solution to that is. But yeah, that. So money invested versus reward, and they'll get there in the end, and it'll just keep happening. But I think that's really sort of a separate issue to this. Every company's always going to have problems, and they'll keep working on that and hopefully get better. Maybe not.
Hi. Hello. Okay, it works. I'm Oliver. I run the World Brain project, and we actually build your Socratic Web. So we started already building that, and I really like the values that you put in, because that's exactly that. It's allowing people to access information, like the whole information tree about a topic or a content point on their own, and making their own minds up. And in our system that we want to build, basically people follow other people that they want to have access to their previous web research, and build on their web research and say, for example, oh, I want to do research around climate science, and instead of going on a fact-checking website, I follow a group of climate scientists and I follow a group of climate change deniers, and I can say, because I proxy my trust over these people, I can at least filter the shit content out. We're promoting good content through this proxy, and even if you get information from a climate change denier, it's not necessarily all false.
Yeah.
But you can make your own minds up. You see the gray areas, and you can decide for yourself, okay, I maybe not know exactly the depth of that topic, so I might not actually believe it so hard, and so I'm not transporting it further into society. That's all. Yeah. So we should definitely talk afterwards, and I'll explain you what we do then in full.
Great.
Cool. Oliver.
Other questions?
Hi, Martin from Lead Stories, fact-checking website. Have you considered using the claim review markup that a lot of fact-checking websites are now using, and which is also used by Google to surface fact checks in search results?
Yeah, the review markup. Yeah, definitely could do. Like with all such things, it's up to the authors to use the markup themselves before it becomes useful. Having not developed the Socratic Web at all, obviously we're not using anything, and with Rebutta having only volunteer developers that at the moment are non-existent, no development's being done, but I'm aware of the markup. But my belief about the solution to this ultimately comes down to human submission, and that form of submission may be using that markup. So in the end thing, yeah, the system would scrape whatever data it could reliably scrape as well, and have like WordPress plugins that will automatically submit for you when you publish to WordPress and things like that. That'll all come with it. But at the end of the day, it's still up to the author to go, yes, this is a rebuttal to that, however they do that.
In this system, actually, the problem is also that somebody needs to moderate submissions, right?
Say again.
I'm just saying that in this system, also the problem is that people need to moderate the submissions. Also, what you recommended of having a marker in the browser, if people submit 100 articles and 50 of them are not actually related, somebody needs to go through that, and then you have again a centralized.
Yeah, so I don't think we'll need to have centralized thing. There will probably need to be some level of moderators at some point, but I expect that a crowd-based approach can work there. And my current approach is You upvote the ones that you think are good critiques, and you spam vote the ones that are inappropriate, not relevant at all. You don't downvote bad critiques. They just don't get upvoted. And so the idea is to filter, to sort them into the quality. The only role for moderators is maybe to check the ones that are spammed, but even then, it should largely take care of itself. But yeah, there wouldn't need to be some moderators to check, to make sure everything's flowing. And then on top of that community-based thing, an algorithm that will develop over time, which is no different to what Google did. That PageRank was a very simple solution. And 15 years later, PageRank's almost got nothing to do with it now because the algorithm's developed in response to that attempt to game and loss.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm concerned that the approach is overly rational and putting too much responsibility on the users. And what I mean is that in the United States, we have a president who refers to all news that doesn't align with his opinions as fake news. And so what's happening is it's not just about false or not false, or even about a rational Socratic process wherein people determine truth from fiction, but it's in fact an ideological problem where legitimate news sources are being accused of being false. So how does your model deal with a cultural divide that I suspect is global at this point?
Yeah, I believe that this approach is the only option we have for dealing with precisely that, because the objective of this is to create a cultural change, but it's a small, subtle, gradual one. So I don't expect this to be implemented in my full vision and every rebuttal gets added to the database and every platform, browser extension, search engine implements it. In this utopian vision of my world, I don't expect Donald Trump voters to suddenly realize that he's an idiot or whatever. I don't expect anything like that to happen. It's not going to make people do backflips over their beliefs. But what it will do is influence people when they're influenceable. So you don't go into the Vatican and try and tell the Pope that God doesn't exist. It's a waste of time, it won't work. But if you have a 12-year-old, a 14-year-old who's just finding out about vaccination for the first time, and they're not sure whether a vaccination causes autism or not, and they go to the web because they heard someone say something, if they search vaccination autism and they just get a bunch of articles that tells them that thing, then that's how their beliefs start to form, because they get a reinforcing content process. They keep reading the same thing from different angles. What I want to see is when they start that process, instead of going down one direction, one rabbit hole, getting that reinforced, they go one step in one direction and one step countering that and one step countering that and so forth. And they get broad argument, they get differing perspectives and exposure to, like I said, exposure to critiques, which teaches them how to be critical in their thinking. And so the more often these, teenagers do that in this environment, the more capable they'll be at critiquing other ideas which they maybe have already started to form beliefs on. And so it will start to affect the next generation more than the current generation to be critical thinkers, to prevent them from becoming ideological in the, I don't know if it prevents ideology, but hopefully directs them towards fact-based ideologies rather than purely nonsense ones or purely fear-based ones or whatever. And as long as, and even for the people that are like strongly ideological in certain areas, no one's strongly ideological about everything. So someone can be massive climate change denier, but have no idea about vaccination. And so when they start researching that, it influences them on that. Every little subtle influence we have on each individual is a step in the right direction and the goal.
Any more questions?
That's Leonardo.
Well, we only have 3 minutes left. Yes, 3 minutes. We have 3 minutes left, so you still have some questions. Yeah, the timing is perfect, but if you have some more questions, you can ask them. I'm wondering if you're too idealistic. I mean, what you're suggesting By the way, we were talking about that last night. The title of this panel is a little bit of a clickbait because we have talked very little about fake news and we talked more about solutions. But it was useful because I noticed that you all were very incredibly listening to a really innovative way of putting it. I mean, I've never heard this before. We've all been very also politically angry about what's happening. So fake news, it's been very ideological for all of us. So it's refreshing to hear you talk about this. But I think it's something that we have to, maybe it has to sink in.
Yeah.
Because the confirmation bias, as you were saying, is something that we are born with. So it's going to be hard to get rid of that.
On the optimistic front, my approach to that is, it's not that I'm naively optimistic and think that if we do this, it'll work. It's that let's try things. Let's do something. Let's do something different. Because all of the things I outlined that everyone's trying, we already have. We have been trying. We've tried to educate the people with more media. Like, there's only so many ways you can say it and expect it to change without changing anything. We've tried to make better. We've always had good journalism. That's where we've come from, was high-quality journalism. And here we are with the problem anyway. So making more high-quality journalism doesn't solve the problem. So I'm not optimistic that I think if we do this, it'll fix it. I'm optimistic that if we try new things, we might get new results.
Yeah. Well, one thing though, quality journalism has always existed, okay? But the fact is that the new thing of the social network, the social platforms, is that they put quality journalism on the same level as anything that's not quality. And so it's hard to distinguish quality and not quality. And so, I mean, the platforms are not neutral. They haven't really been neutral in that respect. I mean, I think the algorithms of the platforms have been the problem because they really haven't allowed us to choose. So I know you disagree with that. It's complex, but thank you so much for this for this new perspective. And I would like you to actually have time to talk with Oliver because he seems to be
I will head
doing
out the back.
something with
I'll head straight out the back
with your ideas.
Hang around as long as anyone wants.
Okay.